Hello everyone and welcome to the Car and Bike Show. I am Siddharth Vinayak Patankar. Yes, we keep working from home, but we will continue to bring you everything that's relevant to you from the car and bike world. Today's episode is a bit of an EV special, electric vehicles, and with good reason. There's a lot that's picking up on the EV front, and we want to show you that our focus on this space is only going to get more serious, more comprehensive, and always focus on what matters to you. So we'll start, of course, by talking about the latest EV to drive into our market. The car arrived a few days ago and in fact was in Mumbai too for the first time when my colleague Samir spent some time with the static product. So that walkabout is something you can find on our YouTube channel. So you can get just a few more details on the exact India spec. But mechanically, the car is exactly like the one that we have showed you in the past. And so the I-Pace, it's such an exciting product. It's a triple winner at the World Car Awards, including being World Car of the Year, and with good reason, because the car will surprise you in so many ways. It's exciting, it's beautiful, and it is brimming with technology. Here is a refresher of my very comprehensive review in a Jaguar I-Pace way back in Portugal, but the car's excitement remains just as high. Jaguar says that it's doubled its portfolio and tripled its sales over the last 10 years, and the high growth period is really only now kicking in because you've got not one but 3 SUVs in the Pace family. Now, of course, the E-Pace and the F-Pace will continue to be the big growth drivers for the brand, but when it comes to the pinnacle of engineering and development for the company, well, that's got to be this car. The I-Pace builds on a new electric platform that uses Jaguar's 30-year aluminium expertise. Expect future electric Jaguars and Land Rovers to use a similar architecture. The layout is simple with a 90 kilowatt battery pack along a very flat floor pan. That's the first edition I'm driving right now. It's the color that gets you straight away because, of course, it's like a signature for this car. Photon red looks really nice. Now, in the face, it's a typical Jaguar, but you've got that scoop and you've got this really exaggerated muscle coming through the fender, running like a signature line all the way to the back. Now, this is where the difference in architecture kicks in from a design perspective, because even the designers say they had so much freedom to play with a very different from the ground up design. It's a long wheelbase, it gives you lots of space, it's a cab forward design as well, and there are certain elements, of course, that have been thrown in from a stylish perspective but also add to the aerodynamics. The flush door handles which retract, and then of course the way the rear is, not a typical coupe line, and yet it's a very, very specifically done thing for aerodynamics. Also gives the car a completely specific design element of its own. The standout design element for me is those big wheels that are almost exaggeratedly large, and they really help balance out the stubby design rather beautifully. The rear is the polarizing bit, as aerodynamics have meant a straight tailgate. The lights at the back are lovely though. Like the exterior, the I-Pace's cabin also uses a white sheet approach. While you do get the twin-screen central console like the Velar, everything else is new. So yes, the inside looks different because of course the seats are placed so much further ahead than they are in usual cars. That's of course down to that architecture. It also gives you a lot more space because it's not just the roominess of the cabin that's increased, but you also get a whole lot of space here in the center because there is no transmission tunnel. So for instance, the little bin down here, over 10 liters of storage in there. Now, it is trying to be very modern in its whole look as well. So the panoramic roof and of course the two screens here help that cause. Now you've seen this before in some of the other JLR vehicles, so I won't get into the details. It is all pretty cool, it's pretty intuitive as well, and it's handy when you're on the road. It's not difficult to use. You've got the virtual cluster, and you know, it's the whole appeal of the car that's a little bit different, and it's a good thing in a way because you want the car to be a little bit of a standout, and the cabin certainly is. You've also got more room, like I said, physically that gets freed up. So 890 millimeters of rear legroom, for instance. It is different, it is cool, and it's really well finished.
What I especially like are the seats, very driver oriented and with excellent comfort and ergonomics. You do get a surprising amount of cabin space, and the car is also higher than you think. The boot is surprisingly spacious at 656 litres, and there's also 27 litres of storage in front, where the engine would be in a regular car. The roads in this region are a good mix of smooth and rough, narrow and wide, making for an engaging drive.
Jaguar engineers specifically and very purposely picked synchronous permanent magnet motors, because what it does is it gives you a lighter weight system. And remember, there are two motors, one on the front and one on the back axle, and two transmissions, and the combined weight of that drivetrain, both front and back, is 78 kilograms each, which is much lighter than what you've seen in some of the other cars. Having two separate motors, one for the front axle and one for the rear, what that does is it doesn't simply give you all-wheel drive, it also gives you independent torque management at both ends. And so it isn't one system trying to send torque on demand to the different wheels. You have separate torque being managed for the front and the back, which of course helps from a traction perspective even when you're off-road.
The battery itself can get an 80% charge in 40 minutes, and every 15 minutes of charge gives it an additional 100 kilometers of range. Maximum range is 480 kilometers.
Now, speaking of running things efficiently, the system will also try and recognize how many people there are in the car and where they're sitting, and again try and give you optimal performance even of the climate control system. So heating or cooling, it'll only do that in the zones of the car where there are actually people seated. And for those people, lots of convenience. There's storage options everywhere, and you also got 6 different USB outlets and 3 charging ports.
Now, this is an SUV, and yet it's not born to stay off the road or anything. Yet you can do things with it you'd have never thought were possible. It has low grip and adaptive surface response modes that sense the terrain and provide ideal traction and braking inputs to climb, descend, and tackle some rough surfaces.
Being an SUV, you always knew that there was going to be some amount of off-roading credentials, but you know, I have to say this is a nice little surprise. We've gone off the road and we are climbing up this dirt track, and something tells me it's going to get a little bit interesting, because that's what happens when it's a Jaguar drive. So here's hoping.
Torque is instant, and so the car doesn't lose grip, as I discovered when we went on a gravel and dust track, crossed a shallow stream bed, climbed some fairly steep mud slopes, and went through some deep ruts. And here's the kicker. I knew the car's layout, the batteries, the motors, low floor, high ride height, all of that lends itself to great dynamics on the road. But that it would be good for off-roading, well, that was a revelation. I also did use the S model on a gravel track, and even then the steel springs did just fine. So it's not like you need the adaptive air suspension as a must to go off the road.
So it's a particularly windy afternoon, but I am still excited because, of course, it's time to get the I-Pace out on the track. And it's not just any track. The circuit here at Portimao is quite special because it's about 4.7 kilometers long, but it's not about the length. It's also not about the sharp corners, and there are quite a few. It's the elevation changes that I remember very fondly from this track, which should be a lot of fun on something which has so much torque on it.
The Autodromo do Algarve in Portimao is indeed special, and yes, I'm now switching to the Indus Silver for this bit in the S trim. Straight away, the sports car-like agility and acceleration are indeed a huge surprise. Is quick through corners, and yes, you can discount some of my enthusiasm that's built on sheer surprise. It's no sports car, but it's not a sluggish and boring electric either. And it really challenges the erstwhile benchmark set by Tesla. And so yes, I do believe Jaguar has set a new benchmark in the electric car space.
Now the I-Pace has nearly 700 Nm of torque, and with any electric car you go into it expecting, of course, a whole lot of that torque to kick in straight away, and this one being an all-wheel drive, going to all the different wheels as well, depending on the kind of traction situation you are in. But it's not just about that. For me, the big surprise really with the I-Pace is how quickly you also get the juice in terms of power. So it's not just a torque story for me, it's also one of power. Lots of it.
Welcome to a new series here at Car and Bike. It is a very exciting space indeed. When you talk about electric vehicles, well, it certainly conjures up imaginative visuals in your mind about very futuristic, very exciting, and also very environmentally conscious vehicles. But it goes well beyond that, because it's one thing to think it, it's another to adopt. And that's what we are here for, to let you know, just in case you're thinking about it, how easy it would be for you to make that transition from ICE to EV. And that is what we would do consistently throughout the next few weeks and months on this particular series. To begin with, though, we'll try and get into the real world space as it stands today. What are the EVs on ground looking like? What's the infrastructure that everybody makes such a big deal out of actually looking like too? And how do you, the consumer, fall in at the center of all of that? It is a new ecosystem. That is what we are looking forward to as consumers. Certainly those of us who are in the middle of it in terms of tracking all of it are equally excited on that front. Anand Kulkarni is the product line director for electric vehicle and ALFA architecture at the passenger vehicle business unit in Tata Motors. And Sandeep Bangia is the head for EV, HA and ESCO business at Tata Power. Also, two gentlemen totally in the thick of things when it comes to this EV space, and like I said, everything that's happening around it. So let me go ahead and welcome them. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Siddharth. Thank you, Siddharth, for having us on the show. Thank you.
No, it's wonderful for you to be able to spend some time with me today, and especially because, like I mentioned, the topic that we have at hand is something around which now there is more than just curiosity. It is, and with good reason, because unlike the run up to this, 2018, 2019, when there was a lot of lip service, a lot of conversation, but no real hard action on ground. Now we are seeing that there is finally a lot of movement. So the basic question that everybody has, of course, is how soon? The good news now is that it's not about if or when, it's all happening. So I'll come to you first, Anand. We've seen that with the EVs themselves, there has been a huge stretch of time where we talked a lot about product, but it was always out of reach. We always talked about what was happening in Western markets. After that came a wave of talking about vehicles that were extremely premium, out of reach. And then finally, in the last 18 to 20 months, the conversation has shifted to more credible, more affordable, more real-world products for a mass consumer. Is that a change that you are particularly excited to see?
Siddharth, you picked up the right points, and it's wonderful because there have been so many things falling into place at the right time. For example, battery prices have been coming down, and then there are expectations about range. And in a country like India, where most of us don't drive more than say 50 odd kilometers a day, you probably need about 200 kilometers, 200 plus kilometers of range to be really able to commute well. And then you have all these factors come together, and suddenly the cars have become more accessible. We also notice and see that people are willing to pay a slight premium on what they drive as ICE cars. And because of the increasing cost of emission treatments on ICE vehicles and the falling battery prices, both of them have sort of worked together to make these cars extremely accessible. And that's where the Nexon hit the right spot at the right time. And then you see all of a sudden the interest is so high, and the uptake, the acceptance and the adoption rates are significantly higher.
The Nexon is a great example, and not just because you're from Tata that I say this, and not just also because it was a significant award winner at the Car and Bike Awards. To us at the jury at the awards, and then of course all of us editorially in the team also, you're right about hitting that sweet spot. So Sandeep, to you next. Of course, the whole idea of when the consumer starts to look at this more credibly, obviously the reason why you are in this business space, but the fact that you're seeing this kind of a credible proof of vehicle concept coming to market now has also got to be encouraging.
Yeah, I think for Tata Power, which is about a 100-year-old power utility, which is there in the business of generation, transmission, and distribution, I think electric vehicle charging was the next logical step to get into. So when there was this discussion about the entire electrical mobility in the country, I think we stepped out and put up our first charging station about 2 years back. And that is also the time at which Tata Tigor and the other vehicles which were coming in. So this is the time that we are now seeing active interest from OEMs, so car manufacturers, to say, guys, what are you up to? How much are you putting up? And we are seeing active collaboration, and we are landing up talking to customers like this. There is a whole narrative around this EV ecosystem, and which is really, answering the chicken and egg situation, as we always like to put it. So we would like to believe that we are trying to be ahead of the curve when the charging infrastructure, as far as charging infrastructure is concerned. Though Anand is never happy, but yeah, we are trying to please him.
The push to plug in. It is our new series, and we will continue our focus on the EV space, like I said. So I'd love your reactions to this, because we want to make sure that we keep you at the center of it. Make sure that everything we do around the EV and all that's around it also has you plugged in at the center of it. So definitely react to that. You can find longer formats of everything you've seen today on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/carandbike. You can reach me on Twitter or Instagram at Sid Patankar, and I look forward to interacting with you. Next week, we'll return with a whole lot more. Until then, if you do step out, please remember, always wear your seatbelts, and of course your helmets too. Bye-bye.